Welcome to another episode of What the Fuck Do You Do? Season 3. We got a really special guest here. Lindsey is a board-certified behavioral analyst in Austin, Texas. Lindsey, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what the fuck does a board-certified behavioral analyst do?
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, so I create individualized treatment plans for kids on the autism spectrum using ABA therapy, which is a one-on-one therapy. And I manage a team of therapists who are the ones implementing this one-on-one therapy every day. And so what I do is I come in and I supervise and I make sure that the programs are being run correctly and successfully. And the goal is that these programs are helping them live their best quality life.
Okay, that's super cool. So how did you get into this?
So I actually didn't even know about ABA therapy until after college. So I had always wanted to work in healthcare, and I was actually supposed to go to school to become a radiation therapist. So I was going to work with cancer patients. And between graduation and starting that program, I was like, I'm going to move to Austin because that's something I've always wanted to do. And I actually started questioning everything. So I started looking into other jobs, and I found an ABA therapy job. And so during the interview, I talked to the CEO and he kind of told me what the career path was. And I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. That sounds like something I would love. And here I am.
What part about it really stuck out to you? Because it's so different than radiation. It's so different than the traditional medical fields.
Yeah. So we specifically work with early intervention kiddos. So they're all between 18 months and 8 years old. And I love that age group. It's so fun. They keep things interesting. They're so blunt. They know how to have fun. So I just really like the population we were working with. And I feel like on a daily basis, you're rewarded for the work you're doing.
Yeah. So I guess the radiation therapy, you were starting to question everything. It was the kids that stuck out to you the most. I feel like working with kids is, or at least for me, is maybe not the easiest thing. So what are the different skills that you need to actually be able to work in this type of profession?
I mean, a lot of patience for sure, but I'm also working with adults and their families. And so I'm working with the kids, obviously, but then my therapist, I'm managing my team of therapists and then their parents as well, the caregivers. So I'm meeting with them on a biweekly basis. It's kind of a little bit of everything.
How do most kids find their way into your center or ABA therapy in general?
So first of all, they need a diagnosis. So they'll typically go to a diagnosing pediatrician. And then if they do get a diagnosis, they'll refer out to an ABA company. And so once they get to us, we'll assess them, we'll determine what skills they need to be working on, and then they get started.
What does that assessment look like? Because this is something that's completely new to me. I love what you all do, but I'm so green when it comes to this. So let's say I'm the parent of a kid who is on the autism spectrum. We get sent to the center. What does that assessment look like? Where do we start?
Yeah, so as a BCBA, I'll kind of determine off of the intake paperwork, the info that the parents give us. I'll determine based off of their age, their skill level, their adaptive level, looking at all those things, I'll determine which assessment they need. So if it's an 18-month-old, it's probably going to be a different assessment than a 6-year-old. And so when I run these assessments, they're kind of showing me what skill deficits they have and what we need to work on.
Yeah. So what does a typical day look like? You mentioned managing therapists, you mentioned putting together treatment plans. I guess walk us through a typical Monday for you.
Mondays, I typically have a lot of meetings, which is not my
Fun.
typical work day. It's just Mondays. But normally I'll plan out my day by supervising certain therapists with certain kids. And so going into a supervision session, I will review a lot of data. So my field is very data driven. I look at data all day long, which I feel is something that people don't really realize that I do. And I'm kind of looking at, okay, on this specific goal, are we making progress? Because if not, we need to make some modifications. And then I go back and I kind of teach the therapists what needs to be changed. And so they'll go in, they'll run the programs with the modifications, and they're taking data as they're running the programs. For example, let's say we're teaching a kid how to let us know when they're hungry, like just like a basic communication skill. I feel like people don't really realize that that's something you sometimes need to teach to these kids. And so they'll tell us, or they'll communicate it in some other way. Like maybe they will bang their hands on the table. Mm-hmm. And we want to teach them, oh, you can say eat, or you can point to the food, or things like that.
Oh, wow. So you have to get really creative in this work, it seems like.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to teach communication. So it's cool to see, like, one kid may verbally talk to us or vocally talk to us, and then another kid uses like a device, which is like a text to talk. So they'll communicate by pressing pictures, and then it tells us what they want.
That's so cool.
So do you have relationships with these kids on an ongoing basis? Like, is it the same kids for multiple years, or is it like a new batch of kids that you're working with at a given time?
So with my current company, I've been there for like 3 years, and I've had the same kids. So it just kind of depends. Some graduate out as they get older and as they meet certain criteria. But some kids, they're only there for a couple months and they leave for whatever reason. Others I've been with for that whole period.
Wow. So you're kind of coming in as it feels like a bit of a co-parent too. Like if you're spending so much time during the day with the kids, like what is that family dynamic like when you're working with the kids and their parents, and then, maybe being that primary caregiver to a certain degree during the day?
Yeah. I mean, some of our kids are with us for 40 hours a week.
Wow.
So yeah, it's like, that's a long time for them to spend outside of their home, especially when they're like 18 months old. So the parents and I form a pretty strong relationship because they look to me to kind of give them feedback on how they're doing and things they need to work on and things that are important to them. So we're in constant communication about like, okay, this is something I really want my kid to be able to do. This is a goal I have for them. And so we'll talk pretty frequently about just where they're at with those types of goals.
Are most parents pretty positive working with y'all, or do they have parents who are like, I don't like what guys are doing, like do it this way, or like, kind of more, I guess, negative?
Helicopter moms.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Every parent's so different. Most of my parents are so great and so just on board with whatever we're working on. Like they trust us as the professionals, but then some, you may have like one parent that's super on board with everything, and then one that's kind of in denial, and they're like, yeah, I don't really know if we need this. But once they see the progress, that's when they really catch on and they're like, okay, let's do this.
That's something that I found really interesting when I was thinking about your interview in particular, because we all often hear like autism is a spectrum, right? And if all of these kids are starting at different places, like what does progress look like? Is there like a holistic way that we're looking at progress, or, is it more individualized?
It's definitely very individualized. So our goal, because we're early interventionists, is to get them ready for school. So once they're school age, we want them to be able to enter a general education classroom. That's not always the case. And so, it just depends on that kid specifically and what their needs are. And sometimes we'll get kids that don't start therapy until way later. So like maybe they're 8 or 9 years old versus like someone who comes to us at 1 or 2 years old. That's when you see so much progress. Like they always say kids can learn languages super easily when they're like 3 years old. Mm-hmm. Versus when they get older. So it's kind of like that.
Was there a point when you started working where it sort of reaffirmed like this was the right career decision?
And did you like it the whole time?
Yeah.
There are some stressful moments. There are definitely times when I question things, but it's just so rewarding. Like I said, like literally on a daily basis, I feel like I'm being rewarded for the work I'm doing. And so that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, you're a good human.
Yeah. I don't necessarily feel that with my job right now.
We
Have
got
you
on some
guys seen
Zooms today.
Parenthood? Like, do you know the show Parenthood?
I've seen it, but I've never
Yeah.
It's with
No.
Dak Shepard.
Yeah, I
So
have
that
seen
was the first time I'd ever seen my line of work like portrayed in a show.
Oh,
Because
wow.
there are
How did
so
they
many
do?
shows about like lawyers and doctors and like paper sales. And so with did you get my joke?
Yeah, some Dunder Mifflin.
Okay.
It's like,
Yeah. Like that was the first time I'd ever seen my field portrayed in a show, and it was like pretty accurate too.
wow.
That's interesting because they're like what you do is incredible, but it's not the most like out there profession. If you hadn't been looking for like healthcare jobs, or if someone hadn't been in that serendipitous moment that you found yourself in, like how would someone find ABA therapy, some of these behavioral health centers? Like how would you get into it?
Well, I feel like the field, like even since I've gotten into it in the past like 6 years, it has grown tremendously. Like diagnosing autism happens a lot quicker. Signs of diagnosis or signs of autism are more easily detectable. And so there's just a huge need for us right now. And so there's so many job posts out there. Like if you search some sort of like healthcare related job, you're probably going to see ABA therapy pop up.
And do you need any kind of credentials to like get your feet wet in ABA therapy?
So to become a therapist, I believe that you need a bachelor's degree, and then there's like specific training in ABA therapy. And then to become a BCBA, there's a lot extra schooling. So I had to get my master's, and then there's a lot of like field work that I had to do.
And that's like a requirement to kind of keep progressing throughout that career.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess what would you recommend for people who do want to get into this? Like, do you have to have a certain like likeness for working with children, or is it the data part, or like what are the things that people would want to flex to be able to like do this well?
Be ready to like be on your feet, be quick on your feet because you're moving around all day long. As a BCBA, like I have my office to do reports and stuff. So I have to report to insurance for each of my kids, but I don't really spend much time in there. Like I'm also on my feet all day. And so, yeah, just being very flexible.
Yeah. No sitting down all day office job.
Nope.
And so speaking of the like flexibility and I think the difficulty of the day to day, I'm always curious with people that do forms of therapy or any sort of mental health care support, like how do you take care of yourself outside the job? Like do the therapists in your office go to therapy themselves? What does that care and support look like to do something really rewarding but difficult?
Yeah, I feel like everyone kind of has their own thing, like a way to unwind, like a lot of us. So we have like G chat, and their messages constantly like outside of work hours. And so a lot of us will just like mute the chat, give us a couple hours to just like do our own thing. I know when I get home, so I am like face to face with people all day long. And my fiance, Blake, so he's an entrepreneur. He works from home. And he's like ready to do stuff, ready to chat when I get home. And he knows like it's an unspoken rule now. I just get like 10 minutes to do nothing and just like not talk to anyone.
It's necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to my wife does the same thing, and she works at home. It's like when those lines are blurred between like his lines are blurred, like he doesn't have an office, and like you come home, like you need some separation. So like having that time to decompress, that's absolutely necessary. I cannot even imagine what it's like for you taking work home. But I am interested because you mentioned that you are managing a team of therapists now. What was that shift like for you going from being, more hands-on with these kiddos into having to do that, but also train a staff, make sure they're like hitting their expectations? Like, what was that transition like for you?
That was something I was always super excited about, but it's also not something that you learn about in school. Like it's something that just from experience, you like learn how to manage a team, what works for your specific team. I always try and think back to like the supervisors I've had and qualities that I've appreciated, especially because I mean, our line of work can get hard. And so I always try and check in on my therapist. Like, I know you mentioned therapy, Travis, like giving people the ability to like plan out a mental health day or just take time for themselves, because as a therapist, like you're on the floor all day and that can be exhausting. So
yeah, that sounds very exhausting.
Intense.
What does like the career progression look like in terms of title? Like, is it a senior analyst next for like BCBSA? Is it a director? Like, what's next for you?
So that's kind of okay. So my company specifically has a different career path than I think most companies do. But as a BCBA, the next step would be senior BCBA, and then assistant clinical director, and then clinical director, and then regional director. So there's definitely room for growth. I'm currently assistant clinical director, so I'm also helping with other BCBAs and kind of overseeing, just making sure that like they're getting the support they need as well.
And I'm curious for these clinics, like, how do y'all stay in business? Like, are the parents supporting this type of intervention, or is it like federal funding? Like, who pays the salaries?
Yeah, so insurance now covers most of ABA therapy. Like none of our patients pay completely out of pocket. So pretty much all of it's covered by insurance. And I feel like that's a newer thing. I don't know when this all came into place, but in the past, it was hard to get access to care because it was really expensive out of pocket, like to pay privately. Most people couldn't afford it. So it's great that insurance is able to cover most of the costs.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like expanding that much access.
Yeah.
That's huge. I mean, I'm curious, like, I feel like we're learning so many new things about this field. Like, what are other common misconceptions about working with children on the spectrum, or just your line of work in general that you deal with?
I mean, I feel like with autism in particular, like there's a lot of misconceptions about it. Like it's not a physical disability. And so people may say, oh, this person doesn't look like they have autism, but there's no like look to it. And every kid is so unique in their own way. And some of them have like these really, really great abilities. And I know that's something that I think people do hear about, is that they're like a savant and they're really great at like musical instruments, or they're able to name every country on a world map. But
I can't do that.
I couldn't either. It's so impressive. Like some of these kids have incredible memories.
What's the craziest like savant story that you have?
So there's this one kid who, this was when I first became a therapist. Like I was so new with the field, didn't really know what I was doing yet, but I was working with this kid and I ended up getting to work with him for like, I want to say 3 years. And so when I first started working with him, he wasn't talking at all. Like he was maybe saying a word here and there, making sounds. But then all of a sudden, you know, through the progression, he was able to, it's kind of the example I used before, like he was able to name every country on the world map, every flag for each country.
Wow.
And he could pronounce every country. So it was so cool to see like this kid who wasn't talking when I first started working with him is now able to like pronounce countries that I don't even know how to pronounce correctly.
Was there like a moment of clarity for him, or like a specific moment where you noticed a shift?
I think just through a lot of repetitiveness. And I mean, ABA is all reinforcement. So just like reinforcing those skills that we want to see. And so I think for him, he just found this interest and he was like, I'm going to go all in on this. Like, this is something I want to know more about.
That's amazing. It has to be so rewarding when you see that payoff from all the patients and, you know, one step forward, one step back type progression. Yeah, I can do that. I can't get North America right most of the time.
I think Africa and Asia is where I would mess up in terms of countries.
Oh, same here.
Those are continents.
I know, but the countries within those is where I would start to mess up. You tried to make me sound dumb, but I'm not going to let you do that.
It wasn't that hard.
I guess what has been like the crowning achievement for you? You know, is it these like stories like this? Is there like a particular kid or a particular moment that happened where you were like, oh man, like I'm on top of the world right now with my job and my career.
Oh my gosh, so many things. I have this one story about this kid who he came to us at like, he was just under 2 years old. I want to say he was like 20 months. And he was just like this little bulldozer. Like all he wanted to do was run around all day, crash into things. Like he wasn't really communicating to us. He was just like running off from us, taking toys out, dumping them on the floor. And this was when I was a brand new BCBA. So I had worked with these kids for a long time, but like in terms of being a supervisor, like I was the one in charge now. So I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? But now he is the funniest kid I've ever met. Like he has the funniest sense of humor. He speaks in full sentences. So he went from like just running around, like running into things, not really saying much, to like telling jokes.
That's amazing.
Just communicating like everything that's on his mind. Like he's an open book, and he is just the funniest kid ever.
I love that.
That's so cool. Well, so for your own career, you know, I assume the more you go up into management or into the director path, like the less hands-on time you're working with kiddos. Like, what do you want more for your future? Like, do you want more of that hands-on experience where you're doing the coaching directly, you're working directly with families, or do you see yourself more like managing the whole operations?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of one of the next steps, but I would have a hard time being away from the kids. Like that's where I find my enjoyment in the field. And so I would like to continue with like a balance, like where I'm managing people, but still having that close contact with the kids. Because right now, I mean, I'm still working with them every day. It's just not one-on-one.
Right.
If I were to be a BCBA, what would I get asked about in the interview?
Ooh.
So you would have to have your qualifications first. But some things I don't really know what I would ask you. Like I did this mock interview once when I first passed, and they were like trying to prepare me for interviews, and it was intense. It was like, tell me about the worst mistake you've ever made. And I was just completely thrown off. Like I had no idea that was coming.
Well, tell us about the worst mistake you've
But
ever
I
made.
I'll pass on that one. But I don't think that's like a typical question. Like that's not something I think you would typically get.
That's like a soul read question. I feel like I've heard what's like a mistake you've made on the job, but like, what's your biggest regret in life?
I know.
Yeah, I would answer, I don't make mistakes. I'm perfect.
Showing up for this interview, drop the mic.
I mean, to that point, like, are you saying that the credentials themselves and the certifications, like that's the most important thing in terms of getting in?
So, I mean, that's like a requirement. I wouldn't say it's the most important thing. Like to go back to Shrey's question, I mean, it's important that you're flexible, that you are able to have tough conversations. Like you're having tough conversations with the families and then also with your therapists when it comes to certain things. So, I mean, it's definitely not always easy when certain things come up and you're the one that has to like bring those things up. But yeah, just being super flexible, good with kids, obviously. I mean, ABA therapy, it doesn't have to be with kids. Like it's actually, that's like the most commonly used way, but it's used with elderly patients, with adults, with like post brain injury. So, I mean, it would depend on the population you're working with.
But do any of these skills that you've now practiced for a long time bleed into your personal life too? Like, do you apply your therapeutic practices to Blake when he's having a hard time?
Oh my God. He thinks so. He's always like, are you using ABA therapy on me? And I'm like, oh, like, especially, I'm sure I do unintentionally, but it's not like I'm setting out to like change Blake's behavior.
I need to see his plan.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm just being kind. That's it.
I'm just listening.
I'm just trying to be there.
Tell me about your day.
How do you continue to improve like your skills in ABA therapy? Was there like formal mentorship or coaching?
Yeah, I definitely look to other BCBAs and like my clinical director as mentors, but we also have continuing education credits that we have to get. And so every 2 years, you know, we have to have a certain amount. So we're constantly doing like, they're called CEUs, but they're like talks about just different aspects of the field. And it could be anything. It could be like communication devices, or it could be how to manage a team and be a better leader. So it kind of hits all the different areas.
What would you say is your leadership style?
Is there like a common style?
It's whatever you think it is.
I mean, I try and just be inclusive with everyone. Like because sometimes we'll have a therapist leave and then someone else joins. So just constantly trying to make everyone feel included. And I definitely want everyone to feel like they can like openly come talk to me, because my biggest pet peeve is like when people aren't truthful. And so I don't want people to feel like they can't be honest with me about things. Like I'd rather know the hard truth than for someone to like sugarcoat things. So I want everyone to feel open and coming to me about things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Probably makes you a good leader.
Does that look like someone actually owning up to their mistakes? Or I guess why would they not want to tell you what's happening?
Yeah, I guess, there's definitely a lot of mistakes that can be made.
Yeah.
But I try and remind everyone that we're all learning. Like ABA as a field has evolved so much. Like I'm sure you've heard ABA horror stories, and we're trying to evolve our field to be like very compassionate and assent based. So like we want to make sure that our patients are like readily involving themselves in therapy, rather than us being like, these are things that you have to do, whether you want to or not. It's like we want them to readily participate.
I feel like the kids would be way more receptive to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely cool to see, because you would think, if they have the option not to do it, then they're going to choose that. But a lot of them actually choose to come and learn from us.
Yeah, turns out people like agency in their own lives.
Yeah, I would love to work for you, Lindsey, just based on everything you said.
Yeah, you sound like a good boss.
Yeah, come work for me. Come apply.
Honestly, yeah.
We need to get certified first.
Yeah, I don't have my credentials.
You have none of the requirements.
But I don't make any mistakes, so there you go.
But I'd be honest all the times I fuck up. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, honesty is the best policy.
That's true.
I'm interested in understanding kind of like what the mistakes look like in ABA, like without getting too into specifics or like specific instances, like what are the main archetypes of mistakes? Is it just like being too harsh with some of the kids? Is it just not communicating well? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, both of those things are definitely common mistakes. Communication is huge, especially because kind of how our day works, or at least for our therapists, is that they work with like 4 to 5 kids. So they'll have like a 2-hour session, and then they go to the next kid, and then it's another 2-hour session. And so it's super important to communicate from one therapist to another what's been going on that day. And it's very easy to like leave out important details. And then the parents may get upset if they don't know about something. And so, I mean, those things happen. Like I know that everyone's super busy and they have a lot on their mind and a lot to keep track of. So, I mean, that's a common mistake. And then what was the other one you mentioned?
I was just saying like being too harsh, or I mean, I guess a lack of communication. Maybe they're one and the same, but
like losing patience maybe sometimes too. Yeah.
Yeah, that type of thing. Because I mean, kids will be kids, and it's easy to lose your patience, but it happens.
Yeah. Nature do be like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess on that note, like it would take someone who's extremely patient if they were coming into this new to be successful. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah.
So if I'm
like patience with yourself.
You
got to be patient with yourself, because I mean, like I said, things are going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's different from like a lot of other types of work where it's like you expect results by a certain time. Like in 1 month, like we expect to have this thing launched or like this thing finished. Whereas it seems like this is just more of accepting the process, and that like things sort of happen on their own time. You have to be patient about it.
Yes, exactly. Like I have some therapists who are like perfectionists, and they want everything to be run perfectly, which I appreciate, but not everyone else is that way. So you don't see the same type of progress across everyone. And so I think that's hard for certain people because they're like, I do things a certain way. I expect everyone else to do it that way. And that's just not how it is.
I think that's in like every industry. I know
Yeah.
like that
Right,
happens in
yeah.
mine.
Yeah. But this sounds like a group of very patient, kind people that are just doing a good thing every day. It sounds like
Yeah.
people I want to hang out with.
Yeah, you would hope they're
Yeah.
motivated because of like what they're actually doing to like
Yeah.
make it work.
Yeah.
Do ABA
Right.
therapists get down? Do they have fun?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We have our happy hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was super awesome. Again, like this was a field like none of us knew like really anything about. I don't think it's like as common in our circles at least. So it was really awesome to hear like just more about your world and what this all looks like for you.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to explain it because it's one of those things where if people ask what I do, if I just say I'm a BCBA or behavior analyst, they're like, oh, so you know what I'm thinking right now. And it's not that at all. Like they think I'm a mind reader.
We've already had a tarot card reader. We're not doing that twice.
Yeah.
I loved that episode. That was so cool.
Oh,
Yeah, that was a good one for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again, Lindsey. Really appreciate it. And yeah. Thanks
You
for hopping
rock.
on.
Keep doing the
Yeah.
hard things and the rewarding things. You're a
You're being
good
a great
human.
person.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys.